Today we're going to clean up the bottom side of this quad. I've got the bike strung up here on this little mobile gantry, and it gives you an idea of what's still under the engine dirt wise that the pressure cleaner didn't get with it sitting upright. I'll come in closer. You can see the dirt in here, under here. There's actually a clod of it still here. Yeah, I'm going to give it a scrape down with the end of a screwdriver to get the large bits off, and then maybe a spray of degreaser to get some of the greasy stuff off, because a lot of it is stuck there because of grease. And we'll see how well it cleans up. One thing I am seeing is there's still powder coat clearly on these pieces, which had just turned to rust on my other bike. You see even up under the fuel tank where the thematic fan was in the way. If the pressure cleaner doesn't get to the plastic cleaned up very easily if it got direct spray. But where you miss, it's still there, and I'd like to get that clear away. Now, I mentioned before about this cover here. That's where the oil strainer, the oil pump picks up behind here, and there's a strainer behind there which I'll remove and clean in the process. I also noticed the tow ball was loose for whatever reason, but yeah, you're just picking up on a bike that belonged to somebody else, and you wonder whether they towed stuff around with a loose tow ball like that, but who knows. Alright, well, I'll start on the cleaning process. I've got the bin there to catch most of the dirt and probably the drips of degreaser that I spray on afterwards. Well, I've got that a bit cleaner. It's not perfect, but that's a combination of a bit of scratching the motorway, a bit of degreaser, and then a bit of soapy water. Now, the casing there, just about eat your dinner off it. As it comes down, you can see what the corrosion and the mud does to the aluminium casing. This here is quite rough, eroded aluminium in that area. Now, I suspect that was in constant contact with the mud that had built up on the tray that sort of runs over this area. And it reaches up to here. It's not so much around the oil drain plug there. There's a big rubber grommet thing that goes around there that seals between the casing and the metal tray. You can sort of see the shiny spots there where it was rubbing. The sides here didn't clean up as nicely as the bottom on both sides. But yeah, the tubular frame is got rust marks or worn marks where things have been rubbing on it, I suspect. There's just a few spots where the powder coats come off, and as you go up further, there's more
bits and pieces that are looking a little bit rusted. I haven't given that front end a thorough clean at this stage, but I'm going to identify all of these spots like that set of brackets there where they are a little bit rusty, and coming down there's a little bit of, wherever there's rust, I'm going to dab on some rust converter and try and pick up, just convert what rust's there, or places where it's lost its powder coat. There's down the bottom end here, looks like bare metal showing in spots and rust on the toe ball, and then there's rust in here. I will just identify those spots. The rust converter sort of converts the rust into a phosphorus material that you can paint over, and actually helps as an etch for the paint. And I've used that on the on my other bike, and then it's a black zinc is the name of the paint, spray paint I use, that is designed to protect the metal. I will just put up a cardboard mask where I don't want the paint to go, and touch up all of these spots before I bring it down. So pretty happy with the cleanup, and you know, I've spent probably an hour on it. I think an hour well spent. Okay, with this bike strung up like this, I've just cracked that oil plug in the bottom of this cover, and it's a larger plug. It needs a 21mm socket. And again, I've used a socket out of my impact driver kit, which is a six-sided one, which looks after the... Now, nothing came out of there. That's not to say there might be some oil at the bottom of this, so let's see if these crack. There we go. Not sure whether there'll be a pocket of oil trapped in here. Let's get these screws out. And I'm not sure what the seal between the block and this cover is, whether there's an O-ring around it or something. Let's put those down. There might be a flood of oil here, might not. And it's not wanting to move. So the suspense of me removing that isn't going to happen. I'm going to have to pry that off. I'll have to stop because I can't do it one-handed. Okay, I had a quick look in there and there was quite a bit of oil, and there's quite a bit of muck as well. Oh, I'm glad I did take that off. Now that's really the catch-all for rubbish in the oil system. I suspect it hasn't been removed, and that could be 25 years of crap in there, which might be okay. I'm going to fish through it just to see whether there's pieces of metal or anything nasty amongst that stuff. But that's the purpose of this pickup area. The mesh on the bottom there's to stop particles of this size flowing back
well, it sucks from here and goes from there to the oil filter, so the larger particles get stopped by that grid and stay in this little sump area. So I'm going to clean those out and see what I can find amongst it. Hopefully there's not too much metal in there.
Okay, I've had a little bit of a look at this oil pickup area, and I've discovered that there's a slot in the side here that connects through to this part of the crankcase. So in here, and that's where that would be the low point in the crankcase for oil to run back to after it's been pumped through bearings and gearboxes and up around the crankshaft and conrod and right up to the rockers and the camshaft. It would roll back into this area, which is the low point in this pickup area. Now there's this little grill I've unscrewed from there, which is to stop larger pieces of crap getting back into the fuel pump. Or not the fuel pump, the oil pump. The oil pickup hole, I'm guessing, is this one here above this grill. That would fire into the oil pump, and from the oil pump through to the oil filter. So I've taken that grill out because there's some pieces of stuff stuck in the mesh, which I didn't really want to blow through to the other side. I wanted to come out this side, and so that's that grill going back. Just a couple of Phillips head screws. They weren't overly tight. I just snugged up, I'd say you'd call that. And so that's that grill back into place. Now, the stuff that I saw in here, and it's now nice and clean, thinking about it, this oil does all the engine galleries as well as around the transmission and the clutch. Now I'm thinking that the material that got stuck in here may be black friction material from the clutches, and that the chunkier pieces may well have come off when the clutches were new, and they found their way down here. And there was no, I was hoping that there wasn't pieces of metal in there that could have come from gears being chipped or something, or dog clutches. There's a sort of dog engagement arrangement with the with a constant mesh gearbox like this. The gears don't move against each other, but there's dog rings that are moved by the selectors, and the edges of those dog rings can chip. But with the dual clutch arrangement in this, it's pretty kind to the gear set, and so there was no detectable metal, no chunks of metal amongst this. I'm going to put this cover back on, and my check's done. So later, when I tip the bike back upright, some oil will run into this area, and when I'm draining the oil for the next, when I do put new oil in it, I'm going to remove this oil plug and the centre one here, not the whole mechanism. And so the old oil that runs will be running back to the centre gallery here and into this point. Will also run out here. This also is a low point in the in the gearbox case. It's probably in fact the lowest point, but I think there's like a bulkhead effectively at between the crank area and the transmission area, and that oil sort of wells up here and wells up here, and there's 3.8 litres, I believe it says on the end of the case, is the capacity. It says it around here, 3.5 litres, 3,500. It says there is the capacity of the cases, and hopefully after I've warmed it up and I remove this plug and that plug and the oil filter and get all the oil out of around the oil filter. The oil filter's just here, mind you, that's close proximity to this and the oil pump. You'll get the bulk of the current oil out. So I'll put this cover on. Just another quick follow-up on what I was just talking about. I assembled this while I was holding it up with the phone the wrong way round. I was putting it on that way, which is wrong. It goes on that way. That's because this surface here is a complete flat surface, and that surface has got these ridges. So the bolts go this way, and that gives clearance for the washers around the bolt. So my last little video showed me assembling that the wrong way. I just worked that out when I put the camera down, so I'll do it the right way now. So that's all back together again, nice and clean. Now, I've been asked to show some of the tools I use. That is a 21mm impact socket, and I'm mainly using that because it's got a hexagon in there rather than a 12-point socket, which is good for when you're removing sump plugs and things, because often they're quite thin, and that one's thin. I've just given that a wire wheel while it was out, and it's looking brand new. The zinc plating on it is still intact. It really just had a rusty surface, but you know, it was really stuck on dust and stuff on there that just the wire wheel took it off and cleaned it up, and it looks brand new now. These are 8mm bolts. They're 8mm hexagon heads. They're actually M6 threads. A lot of the bolts on this engine have got 8mm hexagon heads, but they're M6 bolts. And I've used this little 8mm socket in my little Makita impact wrench with a 1/4-inch drive to undo those and tighten them up. Tightening them up, you've got to be a bit careful because you don't know what torque you're putting on it. I pull the trigger lightly and have it clack, clack, clack when it's tightening up, and you're just snugging them up. You can see that drain plug there, which I might, next time I take it out for when I do drain the oil, I'll give that a wire wheel as well. So that one, the other one looked like this one before I gave it a wire wheel, and just tidies things up. Otherwise, so I used the breaker bar on that 21mm impact socket. I could have put a 1/2-inch drive in here and rattled away on it, but there was no need. I also used just a Phillips screwdriver for doing the Phillips head screws that attach that mesh filter, and I used this just flat blade screwdriver for prizing this cover away. It had the O-ring in behind it. I think you probably saw that. It was just stuck there, and when it came away there was oil up to about this level in there, up to the level of where that slot was in the side, and so the oil that was in there ran down, and it ran down over everything right through to the tow ball. And I quickly grabbed the rubbish tin and put it under there to catch some of that. There was probably a centimetre in a cup would be about the volume of oil that ran down there, but it was enough to run from top to bottom and drip on the floor before I had the bin in place. I then used a bit of degreaser to spray on there again and to loosen up the oil that had run down there, but it's all fairly clean stuff now, so not a big one. So they're the tools, pretty simple. I've got them on this board strung across the bin here just to finish that job off. This screw sheared off when I was removing this back pan. The interesting thing was with it is it unscrewed about a turn before it jammed up, and that's because the thread on the back, which was inaccessible at the time, was rusted and it wouldn't pull through the threaded hole. But what was in the hole would turn, and anyway, it sheared off and it left a bird end on this side which wouldn't pull through the hole. So I've used the angle grinder to grind off this end of it, and I also used a bit of heat to heat this lug, and that's it, it just fell out then, and I will have good thread in that hole because it just unscrewed. But yes, I put the MAP gas here, heated that lug, and the pin was red hot. I also used some yield spray which loosens rust instantly apparently, and so a bit of an armour of implements to get that to come out. And I found that if I could have got the vice jaws in there, the vice grips in there, would have been easier to grip on the back of it, but they didn't fit. I then found a pair of monkey grips that just fitted in there to grip onto the thread on the back, and then I rocked it backwards and forwards, and then eventually found that a pair of pointy nose pliers got it to come out. So I've got the original threads in there. I've got original threads in these, and the other ones that I've fixed are the ones that were tucked up under the mud guards. These ones, these had Phillips head screws going into them, which I figured would never come out. So I drilled the centre of the Phillips head screw, which gives you a bit of an alignment for a drill to drill in there until the heads fell off, but then that left the rest of the stud jammed in here, but it had a little bit of a drill centre in it, and I continued to drill through that with a smaller drill, and then trying to get it to align as best I can to the centre of the threads. And then I also heated that to red hot, because that tends to loosen up the rust, again with some of that yield spray. And then I ran a 5mm drill through there, which is the tapping size for a 6mm bolt, an M6 bolt. And then I ran a tap through, and eventually it pushed the remains of the thread out the back, because that's clear behind it as well. And yes, bit of work on it, but it came good. And exactly the same process on this side. It's yeah, well, there's still a bit of, yeah. So yes, again heating those to red hot. Now I've still got one more to do in the base, which is that one up there in the front. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with that one. It's also one that I think came partially loose before it sheared off. So maybe the same process I've used on the one down the bottom will work on that one. But I didn't want to heat that while the strap was there. That was the main reason I haven't progressed any further with that one. And then if I lower it down, I haven't got the access that I have at the moment. But once I've got those out, I think that's all my casualties fixed. That's the stuff I've applied to the bottom of this frame. The rust here actually looks lighter already. It was applied about 10 minutes ago. And it's not quite the same as another one I've used in the past, where it actually seemed to turn the rust to a white powdery material. This one may in time do that, or it may be a different chemical reaction, but it says it needs half an hour to dry or 2 hours to be fully dry. I've wiped it on everything that looks like rust. There's sort of a powdery finish on those bits there, which may have been zinc plated. It says not to apply a zinc rich primer after this one. It might be different, and my black zinc spray paint that I wanted to put on, which is I think 90% zinc. So I started at the top with that primer, or the rust converter. And just went down hitting everything that looks a bit rusty. It'll be interesting how that works out. We'll wait and see. I'm going to knock off today and come back to it tomorrow. Just reading on the bottom of that rust guard, it says it contains 244 millilitres of phosphoric acid per litre, which means it's full strength phosphoric acid watered down, 1 part of phosphoric acid to about 3 parts of water. But, I think that phosphoric acid leaves a phosphorus powdery thing if it's similar to what I've used before, but we'll see. That's a PPG product, so it should be reasonable. I can spend all day under the skirt of the old lady. Get out to your shed and have some fun yourself.